we'll kick off, and if other people come in, I guess that we're used to that in Zoom, that there are some people who... Am I speaking to people who don't know anything about conflict management for one, or conflict management, or am I speaking to experienced folk? Maybe can we do a very quick whip around and just see who knows what? We'll start with Emma and work in a kind of clockwise circle. Emma, can you just say in a minute or so what you do and what you're up to?
Yes, my background is lawyer. I've been working as a lawyer for as long as I remember. I qualified as an FDRP. Have not started practicing, but that's what I'm looking to do in the short term. Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm not yet familiar with conflict management for one. So yeah, I'm here to learn.
Good, excellent. All right. Diana, can you say briefly, are you deeply in the mediation C? Are you in the FDRC? Or...
No, I'm actually a physiologist by trade, and I work in workplace injury, both psych and physical injury.
Okay.
And I actually do work cover facilitated discussions.
Oh, excellent. All right, good.
Yeah, so sometimes, pardon?
Very relevant to what, I hope very relevant to what...
Yeah, so not all parties want it. It's a voluntary procedure, so not all parties want to go, but so you have frustrated. So this would be, I know nothing about it, but so it would be ideal, I think.
All right, good. Linda, can you say, are you immersed in the world of conflict resolution, or you say you're on the outside?
I'm very similar to Emma, so I'm a lawyer. I've only been accredited in mediation for 2 years.
Yep.
I work mainly with students, so I'm attached to a university. So a lot of the resolutions I do is between students. So that's my background.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. The more you know about the conflict resolution world, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Cheryl, welcome. You've found an image. Can you turn your microphone on and tell us just where you are in the... You'll need to turn your microphone on, Cheryl. You'll need to unmute. We can't hear you. You'll need to unmute. You might...
Sounds like she's having trouble trying to unmute, so...
We'll turn around. David, can you give us a minute of... And
sure.
Explain where you are in the world of conflict?
No problems. I work for an organisation that provides a number of business advisory services, and I became accredited as a mediator around 18 months ago. And in that time, I've done 3 mediations there, and so mainly for business clients who have disputes between employees. And I guess at this stage, I also do some communication skills training, which does venture into that field of difficult conversations and that type of thing, or dealing with difficult people. So it's not strictly mediation, but it is related to that, yes. Obviously. Yeah, so I'm here for today for a little bit of personal development and pick up a few more tips.
Exactly. And we're all doing that, I think, as mediators. We're all, if not mediators, involved in this world of people who've got themselves stuck in various ways. Maybe that could be a summary of the people we deal with. They're stuck and unhappy about being stuck. And whether they try mediation or not might not be central to what you do, but you're dealing with people who've got themselves into a bit of a mess, I guess it's fair to say. What we're picking up during our life are many techniques and ideas and theories to help people who are in a mess to, well, reduce the pain they're in. That would be the goal of conflict management for one, not to solve things, not to produce miracles or perfect solutions, but to reduce pain, because people are in psychological pain, otherwise they wouldn't be coming to you, or they wouldn't be demonstrating the kind of behaviours they're demonstrating. Cheryl, have you solved the problem of unmuting? We still can't hear from you, and I'm just aware that your mouth is opening in an interesting way, but I just can't hear what you're saying. Maybe Roanna can help you with an email about Zoom. Okay, so Roanna's saying perhaps leave and come back in. If I talk, and like most mediators, I'm a great talker, just feel free to interrupt me, because like most mediators, you should be pretty comfortable about being interrupted as well. So I'll work on that basis, that I'll chat away about this. And if you've got something to say, break in. You're most welcome to. I've been a mediator for about 30 years. I've pretty much retired out of mediation, but one thing I learned from it was a program that I evolved called Conflict Mediation for One. And it's similar to conflict coaching, but it's not conflict coaching. It's really designed for mediators who are specifically of that mindset. They've taken mediation training, and so they should understand how to adopt a position of not so much neutrality, but as an unaligned person in a conversation. So a person who's not vested in a conversation. The argument that you would put out for doing conflict management for one rather than thinking only about mediation is that mediation is just a tiny piece of the conflict landscape. And I think for a lot of people, because mediation is known now in the Australian community and it's funded as a product, people jump to the conclusion that there's only one thing you can do when you've got a problem, and that is either two things: litigate or mediate. And we all know that there's a lot more to it than just litigating or mediating. The conflict landscape is big, and it involves a lot of thoughtfulness if you're ready to give it that kind of attention. But I understand that if you're employed to be a mediator, you tend to just see everything in terms of mediation, rather than a carpenter who looks at everything in terms of wood, or a metal worker who sees everything in terms of welding or metal. If you're a mediator, you tend to think mediation, except that when things go wrong, you're really in a mess. And some of you haven't mediated, and that's lovely. Some of you have mediated, and you might have got yourself into a mess and you'll remember the pain of it. I certainly can. When things have turned into a deadlock, or there's very unpleasant language in the room, there's escalating tension, and there are potential walkouts and raise. And generally, as a beginner mediator, you wonder what on earth happened. You wonder why you even do this kind of stuff. And then as a more experienced mediator, you realise that you haven't prepared the people properly for the mediation. And preparing people properly is what this is all about, is slowing things down and having one-on-one conversations with people before they get into the business of mediating with each other. And why do you do that? Because once things go wrong, it's a little bit like being stuck in a cul-de-sac in your car. It's very hard to turn around and get out of there. Once you're in a mediation and things go wrong, bad blood spills out pretty quickly. And people will often remind you of mediations that they attended that weren't successful, where they got hurt, where they weren't fully appreciated, they weren't fully heard, where the other person was abusive, where no progress was made. They remember negatives pretty well. And I think reading about customers remember negative experiences far more than positive ones. It just seems to be a human trait that you remember difficulties because perhaps you learn more from them. I don't know. Maybe in the evolution of human beings, it's very important to know about difficulties and remember them. So when things go wrong, you'll be very regretful if you've mediated too early, or if you've mediated with people who haven't prepared. So Cheryl is sending apologies to everyone, but She is not going to be a vocal contribution to this meeting, but she might be watching nonetheless. Commiseration, Cheryl. After mediating for years, I realised, after having so many bad mediations, like unproductive mediations, unhappy mediations, as well as very good ones, very productive ones that keep you alive and nourished and hopeful for more. But my mind went to work on the problem of what do you do with people who are really ill-prepared? What do you do when someone turns up for an intake or an initial conversation about a mediation, but can't get the other people or parties started, and no one will come to the table with them? What do you do when they're caught attracted to the glitter of litigation? And I guess Emma and Diana, you can both, not Linda and Emma, can both relate to that the glitter of litigation for some people is very attractive indeed. It sparkles like diamonds, and they believe that litigation will somehow lead them to a wonderful outcome. And we know that often it leads them not to anything wonderful at all. They're just poorer and no wiser after a lot of litigation. There had to be a way of getting a process in place before mediation occurred. Or if the worst happened after mediation occurred, when you've got very unhappy people wondering where to now, what are we going to do, or complaining. Or even occasionally, while the mediation's underway, a little bit of hand-holding and coaching and education while people are engaged in a series of mediation meetings. So conflict management is very flexible. It can occur ideally at the outset with people one-on-one, ideally with all the parties involved, but it doesn't have to. Because if one person benefits, that benefit will flow through to the whole process. It can happen during, while people are conducting or waiting to mediate. It can happen afterwards when people wonder why on earth things didn't go the way they thought. So it's quite a flexible process in that way, and it really involves you in a one-on-one conversation, but your mindset is still as a mediator. You do not become anything other than a mediator. So that's the distinctive thing about it. So you're always thinking of the other parties while you're speaking to the one that you have in front of you. You're always thinking of the mediation of the process that they're choosing to go through. It might be conciliation or arbitration or whatever they're considering. You're thinking about that process and you're maneuvering them like the little tug that you're positioning them better and better for the conversation that they're going to have with the other people or the other person. So I use that term, a little tug, like a little tugboat moving intractable ocean liners. And it's an image that I like because mediators shouldn't be full of ego. They should be small creatures that can do work through not being very dominant, through not being very visible. You can get a lot of things done. And in the conversation that is the conflict management for one conversation, which generally lasts about 90 minutes, one-on-one, you can get a lot of things done. And people might even get that shift that we all thirst for, that change of thinking that is really key. Because if you allow people to progress to mediation and they retain their preferred positions, as we call it, they don't change their mind. They have a view and it's going to be a battle for them. They're thinking of mediation more as a debate where there's going to be a winner rather than a negotiation where no one is going to win, but everyone is going to win a little bit. If they can make that move in their thinking, you've effected a great change so that the eventual mediator will be very happy with your work because they'll have a successful, productive mediation rather than a stuck one. How do you do that? One way is to do the course at the Mediation Institute. It's not a very expensive course or a very difficult one to run through it. And consider that before you mediate, you can offer this kind of service to people. That might mean that you're going to have to charge them for something that they would consider to be extra. But in the general scheme of things, it's an investment worth making. I generally suggest that people charge at the same rate as they would for a mediation, because they're consuming an hour of your time, or 2 hours of your time, or 3 hours of your time if you include travel and so on. So generally it would be funded at the same rate. And I've found that people will pay it, but some people won't. They don't like paying for anything. They don't like paying for mediation. So I don't know where they get that thinking from, that when they're in conflict it should be cost-free. But maybe they've come from other traditions where they access counselling or some kind of therapy and it doesn't cost them anything. But generally for us, we would charge. And they will benefit. So I have to put this up. I hope you can see it. Can everyone see that? Right to the top.
Yeah, it's there.
So we've got really a conflict resolution landscape that I'm going to show you. We've got some little beehives, I think they're beehives, and some pathways out from that central square. Conflict can take many paths. And two of you in this group know very well that the legal industry can be part of that conflict resolution landscape. There can be pre-trials, mini-trials, expert opinions. There can be restorative justice, I'd put over in that area. And of course, litigation, ultimately a court hearing. There can be, up in the top left-hand corner, a whole lot of things going on. Family disputes, family dispute resolution. And included in that can be counselling, which I don't think we should dismiss, in that a lot of people who are in great difficulty and can't approach a mediation in a kind of cool, calm way may need counselling, may need some help with personal issues. And it's not suggested at any stage that you become a parapsychologist or parapsychiatrist, but a speedy referral to counselling in that one-on-one meeting might be the most useful thing that you can do. There can be child-inclusive mediation, by the way, as well, other therapeutic services such as intergenerational mediation. Over in the centre, in this yellow kind of beehive, is the one that David is involved in: workplace mediation, commercial mediation. Over on the right-hand side, I guess no one currently is involved in that. You might be. Conciliation, which is really not mediation at all, even though some people suggest it is. It's got crossover skills, but it's not. Mediation, arbitration, med-arb, they call it, very popular in America, where you try mediation, then you switch over to arbitration, and the arbitration gives you a result, almost is a ruling. And there can be other hybrids up in that corner too, private trials. I've heard of them in Australia. They're common in America, where you pay typically a retired judge to run a trial privately and see how it goes without having to go to court and go through the processes. We're interested today, or I'm trying to interest you today, in the yellow square down in the bottom left-hand corner in conflict management. That can be conflict management for, or called CM41, which is offered by the Mediation Institute. It can involve conflict coaching, which is a generic kind of thing, which is offered by private organisations. So you hear about conflict coaches more and more now, who deal with people in conflict in an 8-step, 6-step, rather formularised as tailor-made as CM41. You can delay things down here, so delays can be very important in the conflict resolution landscape. People simply delaying, letting time pass, letting 4 years to see what might happen after that. Postponements, sometimes very strategic, other times quite innocent postponements. And You can have negotiated trials with reviews, which is an outcome from a meeting where something is proposed and then it's tested over time to see if it's merited to go forward with mediation or whether it's working well enough, in which case, that particular problem has been well managed. So that's the corner we're dealing with in a very large landscape. And I'm trying, I suppose, there in that schematic to remind you that mediation is one of many things available. And just because you don't practice all of those things, it doesn't mean that they're not all available to an individual who's finding themselves in conflict with their employer, their colleague, their partner, whatever it is. And simply knowing that there is so much choice can be useful to a client, because certain services are funded. They think, oh, well, I now have to go to mediation. But I hope just might not be a door they need to open so quickly, or it might not be a door that they need to open at all. And after they meet with you, if they do conflict management for one with you, they might conclude that the blue door that they were going to go through is not so wise, that they should go through the yellow door or a red door, some other way, that you describe in metaphorical terms the choices that they've got to proceed. Just thinking about that can be very useful for an individual. They no longer feel railroaded. They can feel that they've got some choice. But I'd remind you that there's costs attached to those choices too. And we all know that the choice of litigation generally is quite an expensive choice compared to the choice of doing nothing, which is going to cost, well, it might cost, but it would appear to cost not a lot to simply postpone and see how things go. Any comments after that? Would anyone like to ask a question or make a comment? Because I've lathered on for half an hour, 20 minutes.
Yes, John, it's David. So I actually have a situation at the moment, where we're in a mediation and one of the parties, so we'll set a date for the mediation, but one of the parties keeps on saying, oh, I'm now not available on that date. And we're now on the third new date. And it's actually been over a month since they did the pre-mediation appointments. And the employer is reporting that the other party is really becoming quite distressed by the delays. So would this be a suitable, if I wasn't already the mediator, that is, would this be a suitable course of action for that person? So,
if you're the mediator, I should mention to your colleagues that you would not be the eventual, if you're the mediator who does conflict management for one with people, you wouldn't be the eventual mediator. You'd typically give it to a colleague. Why? Because you know too much. You've simply learned too much about one person's situation that when you re-enter the mediation, it's impossible to be perceived as unaligned. So that's just a parenthetical thing. David, your situation is common. It's a good thing that you let that person know that it's not unusual, both people, because it could be strategic to torment the other. It could be strategic. Or it could be that one person is just not ready. And often they don't know they're not ready, they just feel they're not ready. And when you feel that you're not ready for something, you tend to postpone. Or it could be quite strategic and you think, I'm going to make you suffer. But by offering a third service, you can break that cycle. Instead of saying, are you going to proceed with mediation or not? Binary choice. It's quite nice to be able to say, there's something else we can do in the meantime while this is happening and you're looking for the right dates. And it's one-on-one and it's conflict management for one. And see what they think about that. For the person who is strategically trying to disrupt things, that's probably not very attractive because they're playing a different kind of game. And it would be nice to invite them into a conversation where you came to understand what that game is but it's probably less likely that they would join. For the person who's just not ready, it could just be an alternative that suits them very nicely. And once they're in a one-on-one conversation with a colleague of yours or someone who does that, they can talk about what conflict means for them. It typically starts with my process with the creation of an agenda, but it's a preset agenda of, I think there's 8 questions. And you ask them, which one do you want to talk about? So just to give you a taste of what a person would be doing if they went into conflict management for one, they start exactly with that, ticking a box. It's the only form. What are the things you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the other person won't participate? Do you want to talk about I'm not ready? Do you want to talk about something has happened in the intervening time? Do you want to complain about the mediation that you've been in? Do you want to know more about what you're getting yourself involved with? They're the opening kind of agenda questions. What are we going to be talking about? And those agenda questions lead you into 4 different kinds of conversations you can have in conflict management for one. The first one is a kind of discussion with the client about what mediation is and isn't, how you prepare for it, how it works, what a typical outcome could be, that kind of thing, to really bring people into an understanding of what they're going to get involved with. It could be a discussion of a theory of conflict. It's very wonderful if people are interested in that and you can talk some theory with them, some ideas about where conflict comes from and how it can be handled, a more abstract conversation that you could have. It could be a discussion of available resources. So a person just knows that mediation's wrong for them. Where to next? What else can I do? So if you know about available resources in their community, it could be a discussion. What if you go to a family dispute resolution centre, for example, if it's a separation? What about if you went to court? What would that look like? What does your lawyer advise you? Have you spoken to a lawyer? What would that involve? So different resources that might be in your community and not in other communities, that could be a resource discussion. Or the 4th one, it could be a kind of coaching where you're really coming alongside the person to better understand what is this really about. It's a great question that you can ask in one-on-one and you can't ask as a mediator in a 2-on-2 with one kind of mediation. What is really going on? And often people have spent so much time thinking about the mess they're in, they can give you an answer pretty quickly. It's all about this, that, or the other. And it gives you a chance to unpack with them what's really going on. And you show yourself, like any mediator shows themselves, a compassionate, humane, detached individual. You're never going to be their friend, but you're friendly. You're never going to be their advocate. You're unaligned. But you live in the same world as these people. You breathe the same air and you eat the same food. You're interested, for some wacky reason, you're interested in conflict. They might be interested in boat building or, I don't know, car racing or football. You're interested in conflict. How it takes shape and how you can change the shape of conflict into something more manageable. As I said at the outset, you're not a miracle worker. You never set yourself up to be 100% successful or to get a perfect result. You're working with conflict to manage it better. So that's why it's called conflict management. You're managing it so that people start from a position and move to a less painful one. So in coaching, you can work fairly closely with an individual, watching and listening to them to see where their strengths are and play to their strengths. Not the strength of their argument, but the strengths of their character. the strengths of their person, so that if they're particularly articulate, you might be able to suggest that as they're very articulate, they might be able to use language in a different way to the way they've been using it. Would they like to consider that kind of exercise? If they're very well read, then maybe they'd like to read something about conflict, to understand something more about theory and more about the people who've working behind the scenes for the last 50 years in America and Australia and other parts of the world, to really unpack conflict. Even as it breaks out in new places all the time, there is a sturdy band of brothers trying to resolve or manage conflict all the time as well. And probably now more than ever, we need to be very active to try and balance the conflicts that are breaking out all over the place for the same reasons as they've always broken out. Deeply rooted human needs not being met. David, I've wandered off the path, but I think the general answer was yes, that to use something like conflict management for one in that scenario could be quite useful.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, John.
That's okay.
So I think Cheryl asked in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to say Cheryl's got a question.
Oh, Cheryl, can you tell us the question, Roanna, please?
Are you saying, John, you cannot wear both hats, being the mediator, i.e. offer conflict management, and FDR, mediation?
That's right. Because you know too much, Cheryl. Particularly if people have disclosed a great deal of personal stuff to you, more than you'd ever require for a mediation purpose, it's better to let a mediator do the mediation. And if you're working with colleagues, you can give the session to a colleague and expect in return they'll give you the conflict management for one job next time. How do I know that? I don't really know anything, but I know that colleagues have been very brave and said, no, I'll do it, that's fine. And it just has not worked. Because when you think about it, if you come into the mediation room as a mediator and different parties know that you've had hours with the other party, they just are not going to accept you. They'll find difficulty with you almost straight away. So one of my trusted colleagues who does a lot of conflict management for one in Brisbane said, John, I'm just going to do, it suits, I'm going to do the whole thing. And she was severely chastened by the experience, and it was, I'm sorry that happened to her, but it vindicated for me that clear advice that you do not be both in a case, that you one or the other. Yep. I hope that answers it, Cheryl. It doesn't mean you give away your mediation status, you remain a mediator, but you look for someone or a colleague that you can swap with. And so one time you're the mediator doing conflict management for a session, 90 minutes to 2 hours. The charge is the same as for mediation. And the next time round, you're the mediator running the mediation. So the same rate for 2 hours of mediation, 3 hours of mediation. Any longer than 3 hours in a session, I think, is cruelty to animals. You might disagree, but I put a limit of 3 on it. Any comments or questions? I know that I'm talking a lot of the time and it's not fair. So if you want to say something or ask something, jump in.
John, a quick question. You talk about the person who runs the conflict management and the mediator who mediates a dispute might not be the same person. What if both parties agree to get trained in conflict management and they still want you to be the mediator? Would you still feel like, no, it's not right?
I think I'd lay out to them why I didn't want to be the mediator. If both parties had done the conflict management with me, both parties, let's say it's in a two-party dispute, and then said, we both want you to be the eventual mediator. I think you'd put out your reservations, but make your own determination. There's no legal reason why you can't.
Right.
So you put it out there cautiously, I think, and maybe see how it goes for you. It might well work.
Okay.
Might.
So I'm thinking if you spend time with them and they feel they trust you and they want you and not just any other mediator who they have to build a relationship against. Yeah. Yeah, but I think I see what your point. Go on with it and see how it goes. And at some point, you feel like it's no longer appropriate, then yeah.
Yes. Because in the term, if they've grown comfortable with you as they would in conflict management for one, you've become quite close in this one-on-one conflict. You've shared a lot and heard a lot. In a way, they don't need you to be the mediator, because without being cruel to mediators or disrespectful to them, the mediator simply does their thing. So the personal side, the really challenging part, the part where you're trying to get a shift in thinking on the part of the client, is in the conflict management for one. The mediation can be really run by anybody. Most mediation has got 8 steps or 10 steps. You do this and you do that. You build an agenda. You ask people if that is satisfactory. You ask which one wants to start. You start with the agenda, then you move to option generation. It could be a pretty straightforward process. The clients needn't to worry, Emma, because if they've spent all that time benefiting from you, it doesn't matter if Fred runs the mediation. As long as Fred does his job, it should be a straightforward matter. They've made it easy for him. In fact, mediators in Brisbane are able to say, this is in Relationships Australia where I'd worked, they could tell the difference between the clients who'd had conflict management for one and the ones who the conflict management for one clients arrived oven ready. Easy to cook, oven ready. The clients who hadn't had conflict management for one, not so predictable. So that was seasoned mediators really able to tell. And so that's what you like, is that the mediator appreciates what you're doing. You're not in competition with the mediator at all.
So, John, David again, sorry, I don't want to hog all the time, but I guess in a situation where you've got two parties in dispute, one wants to take a proactive approach to it, the other one flatly refuses to engage in any form. So the one who's taking a proactive approach, they engage with you in conflict management for one coaching. What would you, in a practical sense, what would you hope would be the outcome? Would it be that they will start to manage the conflict themselves, or just manage their own response to the other person? What are the sort of outcomes that you're looking for?
Both of those things, David. I believe that if you can get a change in one person, the change will flow through into the system. Ideally, you'd like to get a change in both people. And indeed, I've conducted some conflict management for one with school teachers who were about to get into a very nice multi-party mediation, lots of bad blood. And by conducting conflict management for one with 3 of them, it went away. So that was a slightly different situation where they were all paid for by their school. So it was easy for them to say yes because their time was paid for and my fee was paid for. So they all said yes, and I did a session with each of them. One face-to-face because that's what they wanted. One via Zoom, and one on the phone while they were driving. And I suggested they pull over So they pulled over. They said they weren't driving anymore, but we did one in the car. And that was interesting because there were 3 different methods. And the whole thing ran out of puff. The big mediation, which was about to occur, and people would be fired and things would be heard, and simply ran out of steam. So I was very pleased with that. And I cite it to this day as a good example of where conflict management, for one, can be like a lotion. Apply the lotion early to avoid friction, or to avoid, what do you say, trouble.
So just to circle back to the question we talked about before, where you made the point that you can't, if you're going to be the mediator, best that you not be the conflict management for one person, but you could avoid the mediation altogether by doing conflict management for one individually with the parties.
In that case, I did. In that case, it worked that way. I wasn't expecting it to, but I don't make a big drama about the upcoming mediation. They did. And I just discounted it as something that could occur. If the room was booked, that wouldn't be a problem. Just to take the drama out of the mediation and focus on the conflict that was boiling away underneath these teachers. And by having that kind of conversation, particularly with the one in his car, it was early evening and the time was unusual because, you know, when you're dealing on the phone and if you're flexible, maybe you can fit in with people's time frame. And it fitted his time frame very nicely. And even though it was by phone, I thought I could hear some clicking as his brain started to adjust itself. So I wasn't closing the gate and saying, unless you do this, you won't get a mediation. And I wasn't praising the mediation and saying, all this is leading up to the great day. I was just not noticing the mediation very much at all.
Cool. Thank you.
So it can be a face saver. I think in some cases, the conflict management for one can be a face saver. People have had the chance to air with a professional a conflict that's driving them nuts. And if out of that they can think about some practical ways of handling things differently, that might be all they need. Not so much workplace, David, but in perhaps some thinking of relationship issues where people have run out of ideas, and you can nourish them with some your experience of what's worked in other mediation rooms or what you've read about or what you've heard about. And it just might be something there that can pollinate in their brain so that they can take away some practical plan. It's not uncommon that after doing conflict management for one, people take away a practical plan, a sheet of paper with some resolutions written or some agreements about what they're going to do next. Or people like to take something tangible out of the room with them, I've found from experience. So you don't have to, but it could well be that they take a summary of what their plan of action is going to be.
Great. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I think, unless you want to hear more, do you think I've been able to give you a picture of what this is, or are you a little confused about it? If you're a little confused, say so, and I'll try and unconfuse you. It's not an alternative. It's just a useful addition to mediation.
I've got a question.
Yes, Diana.
Are you, because I do facilitated discussions and it's slightly different process, are you aware of the process of facilitated discussions under the work cover?
No, I haven't ever done work. Is it very formulaic?
Yes, it's sort of formulated. Basically, we have part A and part B. Part B, basically the mediation, but the part A is like your pre-intake, a bit of the introduction, bit of exploration, and to the point where, and it's to assess whether mediation is appropriate, the Part B is appropriate.
Yeah.
And either party, usually an employer and a worker, can choose not to participate. However, so I'm wondering whether this could be useful, because usually I'll set aside the same amount for both parties, and then sometimes we have to go to the doctors and stuff to make sure that people can be involved in the process. So I'm just wondering whether it might be useful in the first part, or is it more useful for me when one party chooses to withdraw?
Yes. My hunch, Diana, is to give the client as much choice as you can, and lay it out for them, a little brochure or something like that, explaining what it is. And if people warm to that idea, go with it, rather than imposing it. I gather that you've got some structure there that you have to deal with. But the more choice that you can give people, the better, so that if people feel that they're there by choice, that they're voluntarily attending, wow, there's such a difference to those people who then add you to their next protest. I've been forced to attend, I've been forced to do this, I've been made.
Yeah, because there is a lot of that there's a lot of that feeling, and I do have to reiterate to my colleagues and say, don't give me referrals, because and to the insurers, it's really important that this is a voluntary, and it's not, because I often do get, I've got to do this because work cover said.
Yes. So that you're beating against that victimhood that can arise in conflicted people, that it's a very natural cover to take, I'm a victim. And
absolutely.
in fact, one of the things that my colleague does as part of conflict management, for one, is to go to that triangle, Cartman's victims triangle, the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. And which one are you? So that for some people, that can be a very eye-opening thing, and they realise that they've been running this case of being a victim for perhaps way too long, or that they're a perpetual rescuer, and it can be a great thing. So she uses Cartman's triangle as one of the educative processes when people in CM1 say they want to learn more about why they're in the situation they're in. Why am I in this mess when all the other people that I know are leading happy lives? It's a good thing that you've got an opportunity there to introduce things like Cartman's triangle or other theory, because there's very few other processes that give you the time to have that kind of discussion. You're either doing an intake or you're doing a mediation. It's where do you get that opportunity for the rich conversation? And as I said to Emma, it can be that the richest conversation is in the conflict management for one. The mediation is the execution point. You run through your 8 steps or whatever and out the other end. It's a food for thought. Your situation's not dissimilar to David's, offering something else rather than, or offering more choice, which takes people out of that mind frame that they're forced into something.
Yeah, that could be, worthwhile looking into. Yep, thank you.
Good. Linda, you're the only one who hasn't spoken. Would you like to sum up our event, because it's nearly finished?
No, I'm good. I actually never really come across that was an option or an addition. I'm not, I can see the benefits and I can see why it would work and I can see why it's important. I'm just trying in my head to work out how I would implement that kind of thing, because if best practice would be that if we had this and then it did actually lead to mediation, I'm the only one in my office that does it, so I wouldn't have a colleague to pass off to. So I would have to work out a way to manage if it wasn't resolved in that. But I think it's worth taking on board the idea and the principle of it. I would have to work out a method of actually.
In your situation, I'd imagine you'd either contract the work to a mediator if there was a nearby mediator. The Mediation Institute would have a sheaf of people who could do mediation, or you contract out the conflict mediation for one. And
both possibilities, but we run a free service.
Okay.
So introducing costs would probably just make it just not, but I don't think that students would participate if that meant that it went from a free service to something.
Some of the ones on the conflict management website do offer free as well.
Oh, do they? I will.
Yeah.
It's in the chat. I will look at that link.
So
yeah. I think that it's a really good idea. It's not one that I'd ever considered.
It lets you out of some tight situations though, Linda, a little bit like Diana, where someone is saying, oh, this doesn't sit well with me, this doesn't fit. And then they're starting to turn it around that somehow you're oppressing them, you're forcing them into your process. And you can say, oh, no, there's more choice. For example, you could do conflict management for one. You know, that, and you're relaxed about it, particularly if you can find someone from the list Rowanna's talking about on the conflict management website list, who'll do it for nothing. It's good practice.
Because I think they want experience. I'm pretty sure that's why there's some offering for,
So for students who've just finished conflict management for one, eager to do it, they'll often decide that they'll do that free and put themselves on, what is it, Rowanna? It's a kind of referral list on the conflict management website.
Like a pro bono type scheme. Yeah. Okay. I'll have a look at that.
And if they do that over the phone, it's no great drama.
And the course that John has only a 10-hour course. Most people are doing it within 6 hours. So I did put up the course details as well. If anyone's interested in doing conflict management training for one, there's the link to it as well. But it is, maximum a 10-hour course. Most people get it done within 6. And if you are a member with Mediation Institute, you do get a discount on it.
I wonder if they do all the reading, Rowanna, if it's a 10-hour course.
They do, because they've answered all the questions.
Oh, okay. Right.
So, yeah.
There's a fair amount.
And we do offer a monthly conflict management for one supervision. The next one's the 23rd of May. We've missed this month because of Anzac Day. And the next one will be the 23rd of May at 1 o'clock. If anyone's interested, send me an email, rowanna@mediationinstitute.edu. I'll put you on that list because we send out a calendar invite.
We swap cases, talk about cases or talk about the course or whatever comes up for an hour. So that's quite a good thing that you can be part of if you would like. I hope it's been an interesting hour. I thank you for spending an hour with us and look forward to meeting you again.
Thank you.
And if you do have any questions, feel free to email the office at mediationinstitute.edu and I'll send it on to John as well. If something's come out of here and you go, oh, I just want to ask this question, please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks.